I want to kick off, obviously, so the title of this is Connecting Programmatic Solutions Across Multiple Channels. So we're talking about omnichannel. And I want to kick off by asking you what omnichannel means to each of you. And I know sometimes these setup questions can be quite boring, but it seems to me that everybody has a different definition or a different understanding of what omnichannel means. And it feels like we're getting lost in definitions. So I'm going to go down the line and ask each of you what omnichannel means to you. Then we're going to pull up the poll results and find out what the audience thinks omnichannel is as well. And we'll discuss that. Simi, omnichannel, what is it?
Okay, really simply, I guess my definition is integrated planning and buying strategy across multiple channels and touch points and not treating channels in silo.
Right. John, do you agree?
I'd broadly agree with what Simi just said. Yes, it's the ability to buy across multiple channels. It's also the ability to use data across from one to another and unifying that, so you're not just working with an individual sort of quirk of one channel. They work together as a cohesive whole.
Mallory.
I don't disagree with either of you two, but I think for me, omnichannel is a little bit more of a mindset, particularly in the planning stage, than it is a technical reality because of the way that our landscape is shaped and the difficulty of stitching across. So yeah, maybe in an ideal world it would be exactly what you guys mentioned, but I think not entirely possible in our current landscape.
Interesting. Alex?
I'm going to keep it PG and go holistically planned, delivered, measured across all channels. No silos.
David?
Well, can't stole the words out of my mouth, but maybe it's because we've worked together before. I think just to add to that, I think it's about having the same data set at the top and the same data set at the bottom. So whilst you could be planning it all together, if you're using different data sets of audiences, that's going to almost make it non-omnichannel, makes it more multi-channel. Similar with the measurement, if you're measuring every channel independently, that's going to be less omnichannel. So making sure that all using similar data sets and same source of truth is really important.
So you all broadly agree with some nuances. Mallory, it feels like you don't believe that true omnichannel kind of actually exists. And it feels as well like there's kind of a sense that omnichannel is talked about a lot, but actually much more rarely done and achieved. I think we're all agreeing on that. Could I pull up the poll results and see kind of what our audience have been saying? So they were given the option of reaching the same audience consistently across multiple channels, unified creative message regardless of the channel, single data identity framework to plan, buy and measure, dynamic budget optimization across channels in real time, connecting the walled gardens, or a buzzword, a myth, it means nothing. So no one thinks it's a myth and it means nothing, which is positive. Mallory does, but...
Not quite.
So the majority of people just believe it is reaching the same audience consistently across multiple channels. Do you all, obviously you all agree with that, but kind of what more to multi-channel is there than just that? Because that just feels like it could just be any multi-channel campaign. So Alex, I'll come to you from where you sit, kind of what you're thinking kind of comes on top of that, and then what the barriers are to actually achieving true omnichannel versus kind of just bringing together the same channels.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say about omnichannel is it's a lot harder than it suggests. Everyone talks about it. The percentage of people that talk about it than are actually doing it, very low. The percentage of people that say they're doing it that are actually doing true omnichannel, even lower. So the numbers in terms of how much we talk versus how much we're doing it are very disparate. The one thing I would say is it's really, really challenging to actually do properly, less because necessarily about the operational challenges. I would say, and we spoke about this earlier really briefly, before you get to omnichannel planning, you need to be planning that it's going to be omnichannel. Because one of the biggest challenges when me and Dave did our first omnichannel campaign together was herding all of the cats and putting them all in the right room. Despite us being in the same building, knowing each other for 5 years, we'd never all sat in one room, even though we all worked on one very significant client. So that, for me, was one of the biggest barriers. We need to make sure our agencies, our planning teams, are actually set up in a way that we can actually activate in the way that the client wants, with everything going live at the same time, being all off similar or the same data sets, being delivered, with parity across, let's say, the UK. And then trying to figure out the very large challenge, which is measuring every single channel in a similar way that is fair, because some channels show certain things that others don't. Which should out of home ever be managed on measured on conversions versus a display? Well, it's probably not going to be fair, is it? But you still need to have one thing that you measure everything on. So the biggest challenge for me is the setup, and we've done this now 3 times together. the first time we did it where it wasn't set up amazing, it still went okay, but we learned from the second time and we really got those cats in the right room as such, and it made the whole process so much more seamless. It wasn't seamless, but it seemed seamless from the outside.
I think just to add to that, each channel still played its own role within the omnichannel. Some of the studies I've seen when we've done things on this is different parts have different effects to whether it's mid-funnel, upper funnel, lower funnel, but they all are more powerful together. And then it's trying to find what is the right measurement for that. So if you're just measuring an omnichannel campaign, you don't know whether the user was exposed to one channel or 5 of those channels, but understanding that difference of when they've been exposed to 2 channels or more really starts to show the impact of what omnichannel is. So how do you get people more exposed to more channels and measure it together?
John, you want to say something?
Well, I think from our perspective as a media owner, and particularly out of home, because out of home has historically been the most siloed, probably of all the media, sort of evolution of programmatic has meant that we're now more accessible and we can be bought alongside and be bought as part of using the same data sets as other channels. But we're not in at the stage where these guys are at the beginning of that story. What we want to do is just encourage people to think about where this channel sits as part of that whole thing, where you can essentially hang an omnichannel campaign off say an out-of-home component, and then use that to influence how the mobile component works, how the audio component works, and make sure they all work together. And I think that's something that hasn't historically been something people have really approached. And while we can't do it ourselves directly, we can at least encourage more studies where we use the data, where we learn from one thing, where we talk about the influence of one channel upon another, of how they can improve. You know, I constantly bang on about within my agency contacts about how a search performance campaign will be improved considerably by out-of-home presence. The brand presence, you put a couple of points from your out-of-home, your search money onto out-of-home, your search campaign will work better. But it's tying those things together. Maybe people think that that one channel has a direct influence on another.
Absolutely. Simi, based on what John's saying about kind of where the planning stages and where everything fits together, do you feel that sometimes these channels like out of home, like audio, could be a bit of an afterthought, and it's like we've got some budget left over, let's bung it in audio, or as it actually is everything happening at the upfront planning stage?
Yeah, in the ideal world, it is all happening at the upfront, and it's exactly what these guys have said is about making sure you're accessing the same data sets across all the channels. So just because you're doing multi-channel, if you're doing them separately, that's still not omni-channel. So ideally, you're doing that with the same part that can access all the different touch points, so that, like as John said, in real time, you can assess performance and see if actually X amount of money in search is seeing this multiplier effect on another channel. How do we pivot that in real time and move budget across the different channels? So yeah, it's really important that you're doing it upfront and with ideally one solution partner that can do it all as well.
Mallory, your perspective on my channel is, we're trying to crave this kind of spinning flywheel of kind of what a post omnichannel campaign looks like. What in reality does it look like for you guys, and how are you trying to work with your clients to get them to what they're understanding, what they want versus what is actually achievable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just to kind of clarify my position a little bit.
I'm making out like you're this is like the devil of omnichannel. It's not true.
I do think that, kind of like what these guys are saying, omnichannel is a mindset. It's a way of approaching planning and a way of approaching execution and measurement as well. I think it's possible to have a successful omnichannel strategy even in a fragmented landscape. So you definitely will not be able to track a customer across every single touch point because we have walled gardens, we can't do that. But you can still understand how they might be interacting across all of the channels and make sure that you're being consistent, or as consistent as possible within the frameworks of those channels, and then that you're measuring in a way that gives credit to each of those channels. So for us, that really means focusing on MMM, and then validating MMM with incrementality testing, with sort of more specific testing with some of the partners that can help you to look at unique IDs across channels, and then feeding that back into the top of the sort of planning funnel. So it is possible to create that kind of flywheel, but it's not real time. You're not, unless there's a solution that has come up in the last 10 minutes that connects across all channels. That's not technically possible, and I don't think that we should be chasing that. I don't think that it's realistic. And instead, we should be looking at how we stitch across all of these different ways to measure to get a good enough read, and then to tweak our campaigns appropriately.
one thing to build on what both of you said as well with Simi is we're talking about trying to do omni-channel in real time in the moment, but one of the biggest things that the challenges that is measurement, right? So typical measurement for when we did this and when most people do this, we're looking at sales, we're looking at brand uplift or something similar, right? But when do you receive those results? Well, you get them after the campaign. So actually this omni-channel campaign that you're optimizing in the moment and delivering value for clients, we're doing it after the campaign's ended. So if it is an iterative approach and it's, you know, an always on style Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 call, but it's not actually within that moment, and we all know that quarters have massive differences. So therefore, one of the big challenges, and one thing that, you know, I would really want to see more of, we want to see more omni-channel measurement. From someone coming from a programmatic out-of-home lens, I want to see more programmatic out-of-home measurement. There isn't that many partners who have a proper methodology, a proper way of doing it, and that is a huge challenge because at the moment we haven't got the tools we need to deliver what our clients are asking for, which is proof that this works. So I think that's one massive challenge is measurement isn't at the level we need it to be at to do it in real time. We are going to have to do it post-campaign. That's still amazing, but that isn't what we would all like. We want to be optimizing week 2 with week 1's data. Not possible currently at the moment.
And so, David, yeah, I was going
to say that's almost where agencies are trying to solve it for themselves in some ways, because okay, you could work with one DSP and they'll solve it in one direction, but another DSP will have access to another part of the fragmented marketplace in another direction. So we're trying to work out what is the best DSPs to be using to give us a holistic view of the whole market. Then how do we actually get the right measurement? So we have to find another partner, but maybe you can't connect that even to the search and social. So that's the real complexity of what we're trying to do in the background, which perhaps clients don't see every day. That's the development of what agencies are really trying to do now to bring that value to our customers.
Because actually, programmatically, like looking at John and Alex, kind of you sort of need the other channels, don't you, to really understand what's worked, because measurement is not fantastic. Same with audio, same with CTV, where it's quite fragmented. Actually putting the channels together helps you guys out to be able to prove that your programmatic out of home can work.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of home has always been an interesting challenge to measure against. It's always, you know, we're a broadcast channel, we're not a one-to-one channel, and there's a direct clash with a lot of the sort of the way that people think about programmatic. And historically, it's always been very much a, you know, one-to-one story. But I think there are some really interesting ways to do it. In a previous existence, I did a campaign with Kite Factory. We did a campaign for, I think it was dementia, and we measured performance on that campaign using Google Analytics data. So we had an out-of-home campaign running across a number of media owners, and they were able to actually measure engagement via Google Analytics that was directly spiking according to when the programmatic out-of-home campaign was running. The point is that measurement is custom to every single client. Every single advertiser has a very particular way of working that might suit them. It worked brilliantly for that particular charity client because that was what they were looking for, and that was the story. It wouldn't necessarily be the same for a retail client, but then you look at, say, working with, you know, we are beginning to work more and more closely with people at Dunhumby to use sales data. So we're starting to integrate sales data across the Tesco Express estate, for example, against out-of-home campaigns bought on DOOH screens within catchment of those stores. That's that's the ability. It's not necessarily real time, but it's getting closer. But then when you start tying that in alongside other channels, you start to get a better picture. But we can't, on our own right, we can't measure quite with the accuracy. But when we start working with other channels and understanding what the advertiser wants to achieve, you can do something quite interesting.
Who is leading the charge when it comes to deciding what channels are included in an omnichannel campaign? And when I say what channels, obviously all channels, but kind of what's appropriate. Is it the media owner, like John, is coming to the agency and saying, you need to include us, this is the reason why? Is it the agency saying, actually, let's have a look and see how this works? Is the client saying, I want to be here, there, and everywhere? Like, what's it looking like, Mallory?
I mean, in an ideal world, we're leading that, but we shouldn't be doing it on our own. So as an agency, I think we have a responsibility to bring the channels into the room and to understand how they think that they can contribute to the plan. I think from the client side, it's incredibly important that we have a really clear, specific brief, and that brief is delivered alongside the other partners that we're going to be working with, because, you know, as we've mentioned multiple times, I mean, really, omnichannel happens at that planning stage, and making sure that you're pulling all the potentials into the room, you know, both from, you know, getting it on the plan perspective, but also from in an actual physical sense, you know, having partners come in and talk about what they think they might be able to contribute. I think an agency has a responsibility to lead that process, but it shouldn't be solely coming from the agency.
Simi, from your perspective, you work with a lot of charities. John just mentioned one there. I always think of charities as being very below the line, very kind of performance focused, really kind of wanting to get the direct response out there. How this should be an easy sell for them, right? Because you often see them on TV, as you often see them in out of home. Omnichannel should work really well for them. How do they buy into it?
Yeah, it is that challenge of what we've just spoken about, is that real-time measurement and actually proving that bottom line ROI. Of course, with charities, understandably, you need to prove what we're going to get out of every pound that we invest. But with some of the channels, of course, they're much upper and middle funnel versus perhaps direct response, which will be in that omni-channel approach, direct response display, which will be in that full funnel, which is easier to measure in real time because it's a bit more linear. So yeah, it's about exactly what we've just spoken about, is what metrics are we looking at that is successful in real time, knowing that the broader business impact is going to be a longer term measurement. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed approach. Some are a bit more confident in it, but it can take harder. It can be a bit harder to get that strategy over the line with bottom funnel.
Yeah, I completely understand. Yeah, I mean, clients are wonderful and can be challenging. I want to, Alex and John, how often would you say you're brought into the room at the beginning of an omnichannel planning campaign, or are you never?
It's becoming a little bit more common. I think historically, not massively. It's interesting. I mean, I sit on the programmatic side of things, and programmatic is only just starting to really be brought into the room. I think if you talk to some of my colleagues who work on the more direct side of the business, we as Decaux have historically been we're fairly early in the story. When an advertiser is thinking about out of home, they tend to think about us, so we tend to be involved in that story. That's where it becomes on us to start talking about how we can work with other channels. So one of the stories I'm currently talking about a lot is the crossover between what we do and CTV, which is also a postcode-led, location-planned sort of channel, and where we can, use out-of-home to balance, optimize, build upon the CTV campaign, or vice versa, where CTV can be used to build on an out-of-home campaign. And I think we are starting to get in the room for those conversations. It's not by default, but it is definitely getting better. And I think one interesting thing's happened in the last couple of months is historically we've always seen, and on programmatic, we've seen the specialist DSPs being our lead revenue source. In June this year, for the first time, we saw Trade Desk take over the mantle on that. And I think that's because Trade Desk is fundamentally an omni-channel DSP, and we're seeing now significant growth in demand from agencies who are now putting their programmatic out-of-home buying through the main programmatic teams rather than the specialist out-of-home teams, and starting to buy programmatic alongside other channels through an omni-channel DSP, which is a big step, I think, for the market.
That's very interesting. Alex, from your perspective, how are you seeing things?
Look, we're not brought in as often as I'd like to be. That's the fundamental truth. I think in my previous role, we had a fantastic planning team who truly understood what we could do and the value that we could bring to plans. I think the one thing that I've noticed in my current role is that everyone is very curious by programmatic out of home. They've always liked out of home, but now out of home's got a couple of different tools that we can use. Clients are very curious about it. They want to see what that looks like. They want to see what does that result in. So more and more, I wouldn't say we're necessarily being brought into like the pre-planning phase, but we are now a thought as opposed to always an afterthought, which means instead of coming to us with a set budget, they're coming to us with, I would like to do this. How do I get there? Do I need to be in certain markets in the US? Do I need to be in certain places in the UK? How do I get to that result? What investment do I need? And that's a really nice position to be in. But that is all because we go in there with our array of tools, data science, all of that type of stuff that clients are very excited by. But fundamentally, we're absolutely not in there every single time in the planning phase. I think this is going to happen more and more over the years as we get closer towards a level of omni-channel. But at the same time, every plan doesn't need to be omni-channel. There are some plans that just need to be a direct out-of-home buy because you want mass scale, you don't want data, you don't want an hour-by-hour approach, and that's okay. I think omni-channel is something that we should be looking at for the right plans, not a blanket, we need everything to be omni-channel. The only thing that I can understand, and which is why Trade Desk is, I think, in doing increasingly well, especially with programmatic out-of-home, people love the data sharing, they love the measurement. So it doesn't have to be omni-channel, But if you run with the trade desk, every single campaign has the ability to be retargeted. You don't need to turn it on, it's already there in the background. So that's why I think we're starting to see more people do that, because as much as it's not an omnichannel campaign, they can retarget and benefit on their direct response or audio.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Dave, how are you set up internally? Alex, John, how are they working? Are they working with the Programmatic team when it comes to out of home? Are they working with an AV team? Wrong channel completely. An out of home team? Are they working with AV teams? What's the setup, and how are you managing that internally?
Yeah, so I think it's always an evolving thing. So having now at dentsu, previously when I was at WPP, doing two very different ways. At the moment, we have some clients that come straight to the Programmatic team, and part of that is because they're leading into Programmatic everywhere else, and they've identified, can we try it out of home for the first time? So they're not traditionally an out of home client. So suddenly you have these incrementality clients to a channel. That's really interesting, similar with audio. The other way around is then going that the out of home team's going, we can do this programmatically, and the planning teams are now trying to think how we can connect things more. So at that stage of more channels becoming programmatic, make more of our people be aware of what is possible. So it's not necessarily our setup, it's about how our people are communicating and how they can work together. Which comes back to what Alex was saying earlier, is if people come together earlier on, they can be more aware of it. If the programmatic people and the more data and tech-led people are in the room earlier, they can bring the ideas of, actually, this and this could connect, and this is how we do it, quite simply, rather than thinking of it as just a pipe dream that's impossible.
I think this is, the way that we're set up actually, I think kind of makes this a bit easier, because our client delivery teams are not split into folks who are hands-on keyboard and folks who are planning. Everyone on our team does everything. So, and they're all cross-channel experts. And so we don't have to do as much cat herding to get to an omnichannel plan. Because ideally everybody in the room understands the value of each channel and also has experience optimizing those channels and measuring them. We have a separate data science team, but those teams sit in client-specific pods. And so, I think that kind of smooths the path a little bit, and allows us to kind of talk about omnichannel kind of as a sort of natural thing, rather than, okay, everybody, are we thinking about all the channels? It's just kind of there.
Yeah, we're the same. I'd say we're similarly set up to that as well.
And that makes it easier internally.
Yeah, we'll have our channel specialists within, but we work in collaborative client pods or teams where exactly that the omnichannel discussion is kind of from the beginning collectively, and not siloed across channel teams.
Oh, sorry, Alex.
I was going to say, that approach is interesting. We've done that before in a previous company, but the one challenge with that approach can be like having a real channel expert, like someone who truly understands in every team programmatic out of home, because when there are new evolving channels, CTV, programmatic out of home being two, if you haven't got that real nerd in that area, in that team for that client, it can reduce a client's ability to move there, and you have to keep pulling that person in multiple directions. Is that something you struggle with?
Yeah, well, we have an in-house programmatic team. So we'll have like digital, we'll have offline, then we'll have an in-house programmatic specialist who are our planners and buyers. So they'll work with individual teams to be that nerd in the room, if that makes sense. So we'll bring them in when we need to.
I think one thing we've encountered, particularly because we find ourselves talking to programmatic teams who aren't really familiar with out-of-home as a concept at all, really. It's not been an area they've ever really significantly bought upon, and don't know how to plan it and don't know how to work with it. There isn't necessarily an expert within the agency that's got that. They have to bring someone in from an out-of-home specialist person. And if you could talk to a digital-first agencies historically, if they have ever had to do out of home, they've passed it out to a specialist, like a third party, and not necessarily done it themselves. And now that they can, they're learning how they can do it, but they don't necessarily have that expertise. So what we find ourselves doing much more is engaging with digital first agencies and having that conversation with them and helping them understand the channel, and being sort of on hand as that expert, trying to be relatively neutral in terms of, obviously we'll try and plug JCDecaux, but I will try to be fairly neutral about driving the channel forward rather than just about our own inventory stack.
It's interesting because obviously these channels are referred to as emerging and have been for a long time now, the programmatic versions of them obviously, and yet still there's no one person within any company that actually is the true expert across the history and the current capacity of that channel.
So it's interesting. I mean, one thing is that DSPs are getting better at this. Azerion, who were earlier, they've actually got a specialist, who's obviously just about out of home, who sits in there, who works across the whole group and will help their clients, their agencies, and everyone within their own team understand it. And I think that's the same happens at Trade Desk, same happens to others. And I think that's beginning to happen. And you have channel specialists at DSP level. It's not necessarily an agency won't necessarily have either the time or the staff to manage that process. So if they can bring in people they can trust from an external who can actually give them that feedback, the insight, then there's value there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to shift tack and touch on data, and specifically unlocking first-party data, and if that is a challenge when it comes to planning multiple programmatic channels at the same time, and the clients, if clients are open to that, if they're reticent to kind of bring their first-party data into the mix to allow for a better, more cohesive, more coherent omnichannel campaign, omnichannel activation. Dave, where do you sit with that?
So I guess it depends, one, who the client is. So some large corporate clients don't actually want to share any of their sales data, and that becomes more difficult to work with, where some are willing to give you all the insights. So I talk about first-party data that's CRM-based. Obviously, that's harder to kind of manipulate that and change that to work in channels like out-of-home and audio, versus are using their first-party data as more of an insights background to identify whether it's geos, whether it's certain audiences, where people index. So I think it's all about taking the first-party data, and how do you find another data source to enrich it, to then scale it up, then fits for all the multiple channels. But yeah, some clients just won't want to give you that data because no matter how much they agree with you having it and usefulness, they just have legalities in their business. So it's too much of a difficult to get over. Whereas others will lean all the way into it. And that's just not, depending on who you are as a business, which part of the ecosystem you are, that just comes down to the type of client you're working with.
Mallory, is there more of a requirement from you guys to try and get that data off them and try and help work through that, given that obviously we're seeing a diminishing of third-party cookies and third-party data?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think similar to what you're saying, it can be a little bit of a battle. But what we try to do is really emphasize the benefits. Really, leveraging first-party data is as close as you're going to get to that true omnichannel strategy, or the execution of that true omnichannel strategy. And there are obvious limitations, but I think the how important that data is to executing the strategy is something that you really have to emphasize with the clients. We frequently run into the situation where the marketing team understands that, but the DPO doesn't, and that's kind of a hard bridge to cross. And so sometimes these conversations take months or even years, but ultimately they're worth it. So yeah, it's just about persisting and kind of.
I think to add to that, some clients also don't want the data going into specific companies. They might be a company that leans more into Google or less into Google, and they believe Google shouldn't have that data, or they should have it, or Amazon should or shouldn't. And it just complicates it more, and it's, like I say, it's not even a marketing team's decision. It's so far up a chain, somewhere in a legal room, they're like, no, not having that data.
I think one thing that was surprising to me is when I moved to billups, the amount of clients that are willing to give you that first-party data, because I've come from, Group M, now WPP, 7-8 years, and we probably had it twice. And then within the first 2 months, we had 3 bits of first-party data. And I was all excited. I was like, this is so fun. I've never had this sort of luxury. I haven't actually fully understood the reason as to why we're being afforded that luxury. I don't know if it's because it's not potentially going into a wider, vat of data, or a DSP that is linking with others or something like that. But it's something that really surprised me. I thought we would have a lot less because I thought the tech capabilities may not be there, but it's the opposite. We're having a lot of the opportunity to work with first-party sales data. Normally that's, a great idea. And then you get to the keeper of the data and they go, absolutely not.
It's because it isn't going to Google.
Maybe.
I was just going to say, I think there might be something in there in terms of not wanting to give their data to specific companies, like Google or Meta or others, that somehow seem scarier.
Yeah. That just comes down to the ecosystem we're using to do omnichannel and how that's passing through the pipeline.
My final question is, where is budget across omnichannel being allocated? Where is it coming from? If we're kind of bringing new emerging programmatic channels like out-of-home, like CTV, like audio, into an omnichannel mix, is that budget coming from the traditional versions of those channels, or is it coming from display budget where it might not be as effective as it was and we're trying to look at new things? I guess, Alex and John, what are you seeing from your perspective on the out-of-home side?
We've seen, luckily, we've seen a growth in budgets coming from other programmatic channels, and particularly, coming over from sort of social and search.
It's great news for you.
Which, yeah, I mean, with the best one in the world, out of home is what, 4 or 5% of total UK ad spend. We don't want to cannibalize any of that. We want to get it up to 7 or 8%, and the only way we do that is by using programmatic to encourage that. So we are seeing that, and I think that's really been a big positive for us.
I think it's about using the word incremental all the time. I'm not going to lie and say that I've never borrowed some direct budget. I've always tried to give it back at some point. But typically we talk about incremental. We've got £1 million plan. Well, one's if you gave us another 150, so it's 1.15, and we do some audience first work. Not always does that happen, of course not. Sometimes they go, do you know what, for this one, this is the budget, but next time we'll take it into consideration. But you do have to be so consistent with that messaging, and it can't just be coming from, me or my team. It has to be coming from your client service team, your planning team. We have to constantly be pushing for, that 10% performance pot that we know that a lot of clients like to keep back and move away from and try and actually give it to us. But you have to show them value. That's one thing. I do a lot of talking about measurement because I love it. The minute you can actually show a client results, this did that, and that sold more things or increased your brand awareness or whatever it is, brand uplift, immediately they're doubling down. But if you're not able to show that, it does make it really hard as a new emerging channel. They love out of home. Well, programmatic out of home is non-guaranteed. So there's certain things that they love about out of home they don't get. So you've got to be able to get over that challenge as well as get some incremental budget, which is not the easiest thing. So it definitely does come from a bit of both, but the goal is to always try and say incremental, give us more, or, I can now say take it from the display because it's not my problem.
I mean, agency folk, Simi, where is budget coming from? Where would you like it to come from?
Yeah, I guess, at the beginning point of getting a brief, the priority is definitely hitting the targets that may be on that brief in terms of what do we need to spend and where to be able to get that bottom line result. If some clients are further along with their MMM journeys than others, then it's easier to have that kind of broader channel conversation up front because we can prove our MMM results have shown that this is the long-term effect of that, but some clients are not further along in that journey, so it is very much, I need this ROI in this month to unlock next month's budget, so therefore you need to put it in bottom funnel channels, and then that can be a bit harder. So yeah, ideally, it is that exactly as these guys have said, it's that from the beginning we're able to have that creativity to show the different scenarios and show the incremental effects of layering in all these channels, but yeah, it really depends on the client and their brief.
Thank you. Mallory, you want to say something?
I was just going to say we tend to see we actually tend to see, particularly for these channels, it coming more from traditional still. There is a little bit more of it coming from display budget when display doesn't work, but I think clients still tend to see those as overlapping, right? If we're running a lot of TV or running a lot of CTV and we want to run more CTV, we should just run less TV. And so really pushing that incremental conversation is obviously a boon to everybody, and something that we try to push with our clients.
Brilliant. We're out of time, and we haven't mentioned the word II. I was told the person that does is buying lunch, so I'll buy you all free lunch. Yeah, it's really good. It's going to be tasty.
Is it out there?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's very tasty. I'm not gonna even bother. I feel like there's a lot of conversation about NI. We know it's going to transform everything we do and we look at. So things look very, very different. I would ask you what you think it was going to do, but I feel like, we're out of time. Everyone's hungry and wants lunch. So thank you so much, Simi, John, Mallory, Alex, David. Thank you. Give them a round of applause.